Election night in Oklahoma, the polls closed about an hour ago, and we're looking at the results come in from the primary elections to see who moves on to the general elections in November, or if there will be runoffs coming up in August. Joining me here in the Oklahoman's video studio, Cathy Cummings, representing the Democratic side of things. We have Alex Weintz to her right? The Republican side of things, and from the Oklahoman's newsroom, Rick Green and Ben Felder. Everybody, welcome back. I enjoyed the half-hour discussion we had at the 7 o'clock hour, but now we're beginning to see some results come in, some percentages come in. And Rick, I'm going to start with you. What are we looking at for these percentages as far as it relates to a runoff?
A candidate needs to get 50% plus one vote. In other words, a plurality of the votes. If the candidate doesn't get that, then he ends up in a runoff on August 23rd. And so this is important, particularly in races where there's more than two candidates, and the vote can be dispersed in a way where nobody gets more than 50%. They all have to be knocking on doors in the heat of the summer to make that runoff work for them.
And I should say we're very happy for the air conditioning guy who came in during the downtime. Things are much nicer in here now. But you mentioned the number of candidates, Alex. That was one of our storylines coming into tonight, was would there be a large number of runoffs because of the large amount of candidates running?
Yeah, and I think there will be a large number of runoffs, or at least more than usual. I think one thing that people need to realize is even if none of these incumbents get knocked off tonight, which they may or may not, the makeup of our legislature is going to be very different after November or next year when our new legislators take office, because of term limits and because of a larger than normal number of lawmakers who just decided not to run. So actually 42 of 149 total lawmakers will be new to the House or the Senate next year.
Come 2017, 42 freshmen.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
All freshmen.
Which, you know, it'll, in some respects, will be a breath of fresh air, and voters are going to get change no matter what. But in others, I mean, there are real policy consequences to having a third of any organization, much less the one that writes our laws, essentially be run by rookies. And so they'll be learning a lot, and the people who work with them, and state agencies and lobbyists and all the people who work in and around the Capitol will be trying to meet them really quick and figure out this new legislature and how it works.
Let's dive into some of the numbers, and I should explain the numbers you're seeing from the State Election Board are correct, the percentages are correct. The precincts reporting are correct. That timestamp at the top, a little bit funky, we're working on that. Ben, what are some of the races we're looking at? What has caught your eye so far?
Yeah, well, there's a few interesting races. I think Senate District 45, which includes Mustang and parts of South Oklahoma City. This is a Republican district. Tonight's winner, or the primary winner, will take the seat. This is incumbent Senator Kyle Lovelace's seat. He's running for re-election. He has two opponents, and his biggest challenger seems to be Mike Mason, who is a former Teacher of the Year for the Mustang schools. And so we've talked a lot about these teacher candidates, these education candidates. I've really kind of looked at this district as kind of being a bellwether of how this is going to go. I think if Lovelace holds on, if he wins by a large margin, it really shows that I think there's going to be some success for the incumbents, especially trying to weather the storm from some of these teacher candidates. If Mason can pull the upset, and it would be an upset as we talked about earlier, only one of the last 30 incumbents to be challenged in the primary has fallen, then maybe it shows that the grassroots nature of these teacher campaigns is going to be more successful than maybe we thought. It's a safe bet to say that the incumbents have outspent. They have higher name recognition. I think what's interesting in this district too is you've got a popular teacher, Teacher of the Year, probably people know him. He's kind of popular in the community of Mustang, which is the largest community in that district. If you were to look at that map of the district, it looks like a giant U. And a couple months ago when I was talking to Mr. Mason as he was out campaigning, one of the things he told me was he was still trying to figure out the district. And not that he didn't understand it, but really just the geography of it and learning that district. And it sounds kind of silly and simple, but talking with Senator Lovelace, he knew it pretty well because he's knocked on those doors several times and he's been out there. And so just those little advantages go a long way for incumbents, but that's going to be an interesting one to watch to see if this kind of pro-education movement is successful. But I think Alex made some really great points in our last segment. I mean, saying that education is important for a lot of people. That does not always mean that increased funding is how they see it. And if you talk to Lovelace, he'll tell you, hey, I'm pro-education too. I'm for school consolidation, looking for ways to decrease the money we're spending on administrators and pumping that into the classroom. Maybe expanding school choice, very popular policy positions, especially with Republicans. And so it's just kind of a matter of how you see education and which path you see as the best way to take for improving our schools.
Sure, I work with a lot of Republicans who education is their #1 issue, and specifically what they want to do is establish education savings accounts where tax dollars follow students to whatever school they choose to go to, including private schools or homeschools or tutoring or wherever it might be. And obviously that is anathema to the public school establishment and public school teachers unions and superintendents who feel it as a grab of their money supply. But you know, that's a Republican primary issue, which isn't really represented by these education, as we're calling them, candidates.
Yeah, that's why
Kathy, I see some heads shaking over here.
Well, the education candidates are vehemently against charter schools and school choice and vouchers and all of these things, because what in their opinion, it takes away from everybody having an equal education. So, you know, when you have a school choice, or you get these kids over here get to go to private school because they can afford the extra costs that go into being in a private school. The uniforms, the fees are so many that this other child can't afford. So they feel like they get left behind. And you know, I think they all need an opportunity, not just the few who can afford, you know, to go to that private school. So yeah, that's a huge deal.
And I understand and respect that argument. Usually it's one that gets more traction in Democratic primaries or maybe a general election, which is why I'm still skeptical that people making the point that Cathy just did are going to find great success in Republican primaries.
Right, but a lot of the Republicans that are teachers, a lot of these teachers are Republicans, I should say.
One thing that I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I'm just,
One thing that I find interesting is this idea of a raise for teachers. And I'd be interested to hear what you both have to say about that. It seems like what I've heard is that polling indicates that there's widespread support for a raise, maybe different ideas on how to get there. But is the penny sales tax going to be a litmus test for candidates going forward, whether or not they support a $5,000 teacher raise?
Well, I think they all want a raise, and I think we can all agree that the teachers need a raise. I mean, being 50th, 49th, or 50th in teacher pay, I mean, that's really shameful, I think. I mean, it even shows we just don't support the teachers. I mean, to me, that shows we have no respect for our teachers if we're willing to let them be last in teacher pay. I don't necessarily think the penny sales tax is the way to go. From a business perspective, being a business person, you know, that's a lot of money. If you're trying to attract business here, I think that is a deterrent. You know, but the other thing is when I think when they voted, or I'm sorry, when Boren collected all these signatures, I think the legislators are going, okay, well, let them take care of it. So we're just going to cut higher ed, and you know, so they cut higher ed because I know my kids go to OU and OSU that we're paying more tuition next year. But I think they saw that, oh, let him take care of that penny for the teacher's raise so we don't have to worry about it.
Right. I think it's an interesting question about whether that'll be a litmus test for candidates. On the one hand, you know, a conservative argument that you might expect to hear from Republicans is, well, that will give us literally, I believe in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, the highest sales tax in the country. That can't be a good thing for our economy or for consumers or for businesses. On the other hand, they don't want to be opposed to teacher pay raises because, as you said, polling data largely indicates support for that. I think what gives them a way out is that it's a ballot initiative. So you're free as a Republican to say, look, I'm uncomfortable with high taxes. I support, like most people, teacher pay raises, and voters will have the opportunity to make up their minds about this when they go to vote in November.
So you think they're putting it on the voters to decide because they don't want to make the decision to, you know?
Well, let me just get this. We've been talking, a lot of the talk has been about, you know, what if we see kind of a wave of these pro-public education candidates elected? What if the opposite is true? What if we don't? And what does that mean for the next session? In the sense that, I mean, it's a Republican majority at the Capitol. So when we talk about Republican ideas, there's no shortage of Republicans to support them, but not every Republican is the same. And Rick, you wrote about this at the end of the session, why there were largely popular Republican proposals that couldn't get through, that the governor had proposed. Everyone's got their own ideas, and school vouchers and savings accounts have been kind of a controversial topic at the Capitol, even with a majority of Republicans. What if we don't see that wave of pro-education teachers? Next session, are the Republican leaders going to feel like they have more cover to say, you know what? The voters have decided it didn't bring in those anti-school choice candidates. Maybe the penny sales tax failed. We feel a lot more comfortable, especially since we're not going into an election year, to try to bring these kind of school choice policies forward.
Sure. Well, look, I'm admittedly I'm biased, but I hope that's what happens.
I hope that's not what happens.
And I imagine we would come to this, yeah. But I think that there is there is a possibility that there was a wave and it breaks short of where people were thought, or for some people were afraid it might. And the idea that the education establishment is somehow like an all-powerful boogeyman that can't be crossed legislatively may proceed, and we may see some action on these education reform and improvement issues that have stalled before.
Particularly since next session won't be an election year.
Yeah.
Right.
In addition to school vouchers, school consolidation was a huge issue for Republicans and some Democrats, saying it's absolutely needed with more than 500 school districts. But when a bill came up for it, all the teachers and parents and superintendents showed up that day in the committee, and it went absolutely nowhere. It died right there. So I don't know if that's just the pressure of the public coming to bear, or if it's the fact that it was an election year as well, or maybe a little bit of both.
I think a little bit of both, actually.
Sure.
So I'm looking at Kyle Lovelace is way ahead, which I'm surprised at that. I mean, I thought that Mike Mason was going to do, a little bit better than that.
I guess it just kind of shows the power of the incumbency.
Right.
As Alex was mentioning, the one race that I see that kind of surprised me a little bit is the successor to Clark Jolly in the Senate in the Edmond area. And right now there's a former Air Force captain by the name of Adam Pugh, who is slightly ahead of the ultra-conservative Reverend Paul Blair. And that's kind of interesting, I think, for Edmond.
It is interesting, yeah.
I think it's a fascinating race because you hear a lot of people talk about different wings of the Republican Party, or sometimes they say that the Republican Party split. That is a case where there are two very different candidates representing two very different wings. I think Pugh is the definitely the business side and the more moderate side of the party. Paul Blair is a force of nature in his own right.
That's a nice way to put it.
He is a fire-breathing, social conservative, Tea Party conservative, and he would be the first person to agree with that description. So it's an interesting battle for the soul of the Edmond Republican Party.
And this is a race that I think points to what will be interesting to look at come November with a presidential election at the same time, because this is a Republican seat. Nobody questions that. There's one Democrat running, Kevin McDonald, another teacher, another popular teacher in this area. Republicans outnumber Democrats in this Edmond district. But we were talking off air a little bit before we came on about this idea that what if Blair were to win, and then come November you have a Clinton-Trump ticket, and Democrats come out in larger numbers than usual simply to vote against Trump, and also now they have a little bit more motivation to vote against Blair. And what if the opposite is true for Republicans who are saying, I'm not too excited about this election, I'm not really wanting to vote for either, I may stay home or not be as enthusiastic, especially with Blair on the ballot. I'm not predicting that a Blair win in the primaries would mean that this seat flips. I think it still would be an uphill battle. But I think it points to some of the interesting storylines. We're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but that come November in a presidential year could definitely impact some of these local races down the ballot.
Sure. One thing I think is important for viewers to see here is that just in the last 5 minutes, a lot of the results that we've been talking about have been flip-flopping.
Right.
So when we first started talking, Blair was up by 10 points. So I mean, these are definitely live results. They're coming in and they aren't changing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. My husband was holding signs up for Adam Pugh today on the street corner.
Maybe it worked. Five of those 28 precincts reporting. Adam Pugh 49%, Paul Blair 44%. It's like a Dell versus Mac convention over here at the news desk, got the laptops over here. And they're following the county election, the state election board results. What are some of the other races you guys are looking at that's catching your eye?
Well, Cathy, tell me what you were saying about the race with Robin Matthews.
Oh, Robin
here.
Matthews. That's House District, was it 85? 85. Cindy Munson's already in. She's the Democrat that will go into the general. And I was telling Alex that Robin Matthews is a Republican version of Cindy Munson. I mean, you know, good looking, well-spoken, educated, and so I think those two might be paired up in the general. That, I think, is going to be really interesting to see.
They are sort of mirror images of each other.
They really are.
Sort of young millennial candidates.
20s, I think 26, I think, is
Yeah. This is an interesting
Robin.
seat because this flipped for the Democrats in the special
Right.
election last year. Munson,
With
the
David
incumbent,
Dank.
no challenger. Kind of a moderate district, but still leans Republican.
Right.
You know, Munson going against Dank, she was running against someone with great name recognition, great
Yeah.
respect. She ran that first time and lost.
But it was
Dank,
close.
It was close.
It was pretty close.
You know, Dank passed away, and
Right.
then all of a sudden she became the one with the name recognition, and was able to ride that to victory in the special election.
Right.
Alex, tell me, you're a more insider on this, but this sounds like one that Republicans really want back bad.
they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this is my district. This is where I live, and I think there was a sense that they really let that one get away. There was very low turnout. It was just, for whatever reason, Republicans did not get to the polls. And as you said, there was a very well-prepared, hard-working Democrat candidate who had been campaigning
Yeah,
for years,
she worked
to her
hard.
credit. So,
Yeah.
do you? What is your take on? Do you think that the demographics in that district are shifting, and that it's there's potential to make it a more permanent Democratic seat?
Oh, I think so. I live in that district too, by the way.
Well.
Yes. Oh, I think so. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Well, if you live there too, I'll need to drop by and get some more lasagna.
There you go. Yes. Right down the street.
Right.
Well, we were tracking the incumbents, looking as to see how they would do tonight. One of the candidates you guys were looking at was Cori Brooks. He was an incumbent that was trailing earlier. I'm not seeing that result scroll through our feed right now, but what are you guys seeing on him?
Well, before we started the segment, he was down by 11 points to Paul Scott, the challenger in that one. And so it's interesting. I don't quite know the dynamics of that.
What district was that, by the way? Do we know?
It covers Garvin, Grady, McLean counties. And both candidates are pretty far to the right, it seems like.
43. Sorry.
43,
yeah.
thanks.
If anything, it may be that Paul Scott is a little bit farther to the right than Cori Brooks. But this is kind of the breaking the rule on this one, because incumbents seem like they're really having a great night.
And Cori Brooks was endorsed by the teachers as well, and so was Leah Paulin, who is the Democrat that is going to be going into the general. So,
Why do the incumbents have so much power in these elections? Is it money? As part of it, and what does the money buy? The lawn signs, are they that important?
No, I think a lot of it is TV. TV is so expensive. I think that's what the majority of these candidates are really trying to do. I know that you can tell which ones have money in their campaigns by how many TV ads are just running back to back to back.
How about the consultants that the money can buy?
The consultants that can buy airtime.
No, the fact that the candidates with the money can get high-powered political consultants
right.
that can organize a winning campaign.
Yeah,
Right.
that actually
Well, guys,
makes
I'll cut in
that
at this
makes a
point.
difference.
Congressman Steve Russell giving his victory speech. Let's go to that.
Jack. There he is. There's an arm back there somewhere. Harley Lovato, Zubar Rahman, and Callan Perrin. Raise your arms. Okay, they're in the back here. So great foot troops, and Matt Robertson, he's been a faithful warrior at our campaign the last couple out there tirelessly. We really appreciate all of the hard work that these folks have done. And to Hannah Walter, my youngest daughter, she's been an absolute battle leader out there doing great things as a field operations director, and she even filed for me because I was voting on the House floor during filing, and she was taking care of that And Alana Grimaud, who was also in our first race. We really appreciate her great work with the campaign. She's been the campaign manager and all the volunteers that we've had. And I also want to thank Holly Gerard, who is with us here tonight. It started out around a table and some ideas, and now here we are in round 2. And Holly, thank you for everything that you do. JD, from a conversation in Baghdad to now 2 Republican primary wins. Who'd have thunk it? I appreciate your friendship. You're a great battle buddy, and you've always been there for me. I'm very grateful to you. I'm grateful, obviously, to my family, my sister and brother-in-law who are here tonight, Janelle and JP, my mother. Words I don't even have them, Mom. Thank you for all the encouragement that you've given me. One of the first call I made after talking to my wife about whether or not I would run the first time, I called my mother. I said, "What would you think if I got back into politics?" And her response was, "Well, I knew it'd just be a matter of time." So I'm like, "How can you possibly know that?" She's my mom. So, but it's great. Pat, thank you for all the support that you've both been. I'm especially grateful to my wife, Cindy, this beautiful woman that is right here. She puts up with a lot. Full military career, 15 moves in 21 years, a couple since we've been back here. I love you dearly. You've been a tremendous support through everything, and I'm very, very grateful. To Mr. Volpe, thank you for running a clean race. That is appreciated. And to all of our supporters, there's my oldest daughter. She just came in, and a couple of sons. So Jessica Headley and her husband Brian, and then Hannah's husband Sam came in. So it's good to see them. We've got part of the hee-haw gang here, so that's been good. While I'm grateful and I'm blown away by the tremendous percentage and support that I've had from the district, it's very humbling. And I'm also mindful of the 75th Psalm, that we should never take anything for granted, where it says in verses 4 through 6, "Lift not your horn on high, neither speak with a stiff neck, for promotion does not come from the east or west or the south, but promotion comes from the Lord. He puts down one, and he lifts up another." It's my prayer, and I hope that you'll join me in the coming.
All right, that's Congressman Steve Russell. He's in the 5th Congressional District. He's giving his victory speech to his supporters. I think we met a ton of his family during that live shot. We appreciate our Adam Kemp being there. Speaking of the 5th Congressional District, we have Juliana Keeping. She's also on the Democratic side of things. She's with Tom Guild, and we'll be cutting to Tom Guild here shortly with Juliana Keeping. But again, that was Republican congressional candidate Steve Russell giving his acceptance speech. Guys, I know during that handshaking moment for Congressman Russell, you guys were poring over some other race results. What's catching your eye?
Well, I just noticed that Adam Pugh is over 50% now, and Blair is a few points back in Clark Jolly's old district. So it seems like the former Air Force captain is doing pretty good against the fiery Baptist preacher.
We also have a couple incumbents that look like they're in trouble. Representative Cori Brooks and Dennis Johnson as well. He is, in particular, looks like down 42% to 58. So with 23 to 26 precincts reporting. So that's an incumbent. That would certainly be an upset.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the House districts that I've been looking at and have written about in recent weeks is in northwest Oklahoma City. We talked about 85, kind of a more moderate district. It's in play for both parties, it seems. Right. 87 is the seat that is Colin Waukee and Kelly Meredith. Pretty close right now, about half the precincts reporting Waukee. This is the Democratic primary. Waukee ahead 51 to Kelly's 49. So really close right there. There's also a Republican primary going on. Now this is to replace Jason Nelson, who's not seeking re-election, who has won fairly easily the last when he's run. But this is a seat that when there has been an open race, it's been pretty competitive.
Well, didn't Colin come fairly close to him?
He came
in 2014.
Yeah, so one reason why this primary is really interesting is Waukee has that kind of name recognition after already running 2 years ago. Kelly, endorsed by the pro-public education cohort. I think Colin might actually be as well. They both are. And so that one will be kind of interesting to see who's going to be the Democratic nominee to try to take that seat. Because I think if the Democrats are going to be successful in November at taking any seats, I think 87 is one of those to watch where they may have a chance.
I think it's winnable, definitely for the Democrats.
Interesting, Cathy. You said both of those were good candidates.
They are. You know,
one of our reporters spoke with someone coming out of the polls. She said the exact same thing. She's like, I voted for this one, but actually I liked both candidates.
Well, and you know, my husband and I, we actually donated to both of their campaigns. And Colin got in a little bit later than Kelly Meredith. And so I wish one of them would run for a different office, because I think they're both great candidates. I think that both of them could win. So.
You would know about running for office. You ran for lieutenant governor back in 2014.
Yes.
Any political future for you?
Well,
as far as running for office, I mean.
As far as running for office, I told my husband that I am going to wait till the general election, and so in November, if the Democrats actually come out to vote, then I'll make a decision.
Do you think there's other people like you, kind of waiting and seeing? Are things changing?
Oh yeah.
Whether it's Republican or Democrat change, observing.
Yeah. Well, you know, and you know, lucky me, I was part of that 2014 election with the lowest Democratic voter turnout in history. So you know, that's one on my belt. But what can I say? But I think that you know, we have the government that everyone voted for, and so I think in 2018, I think. You know, Democrats can come out to vote and support these candidates. And I think, you know, there are some people waiting kind of in the wings to run for governor and all of these seats, you know, in 2018. But like you said, they're waiting. I mean, it takes a lot out of you to run for office. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money, and mostly time, you know, time away from your families and your business. And I think if people are going to make that kind of sacrifice, then I think they need the support of their party. Plain and simple.
Cathy, let me ask you this. Do you think that there is I guess, a resurgent Democratic Party, or at least attitude in Oklahoma? And do you think in the next cycle, or in 2 years, or in 4 years, Democratic candidates are going to feel more comfortable being some, you know, like fire-breathing progressives instead of trying to, you called it Republican light?
Well, you know, the exciting thing is, so in 2014, when I, you know, would go from town to town, and I literally walked the entire state, and I would literally have to say, I'm a Democrat. You know, you'd have to whisper it. And I would go to a courthouse, like in Shawnee, and the lady I would be chased down the hall and go, I'm a Democrat too, I just want you to know that, but I can't say it in public. And I was like, well, why not? And she goes, because she was afraid of losing her job, honestly. So I think now people are excited to say they're a Democrat. I think that tide is changing. So it's not so bad to be a Democrat these days.
What can we do to stop that?
And you know, we welcome everybody. If you ever want to change parties, I will welcome you with open arms.
I think there's reason to be optimistic for Democrats when you look at demographics across the state. David, you and I were talking about this earlier today. I think Oklahoma is becoming, you know, you're seeing more families, it's becoming more diverse. The difference is that there's a difference between citizen demographics and voter demographics. And one thing that I'm really interested to watch, I said this earlier in the first segment, is the turnout and the demographics that turn out, because we're still seeing an electorate that is fairly older, it's mainly white. We haven't seen that growth, that new demographic of Oklahoma really enter into the voting block. And I don't know if that's just a matter of time before it changes. I don't know what Democrats are trying to do to encourage that. Republicans, I know, are paying attention to that as well. But right now, the demographic shifts don't seem to be really translating into the voter demographic changes yet.
Right. Well, I think like in our part of the state, I think, you know, there's like 5 or 6 different factions of Democrats. You know, we have the the LGBT group, we have the Change Oklahoma group, we have the Latinos, we have the Bernie supporters, you know, and the Hispanics, I said that, African Americans, but then we also have the old-time Democrats, you know, like Governor Henry and Governor Walters and Drew Edmondson and Jerry Askins, and you know, we all know each other and we all get along, but you know, I feel like with all of these different factions, it's all coming to play. I think there is more diversity among us, that we're more accepting of really everybody. I think it's completely different though in the rural areas. You know, you know.
I think one thing that's true is that nothing's going to happen real fast in the
Right.
state, because right now the GOP has such a stranglehold on every level of government. And voter registration rolls indicate that Republicans are picking up numbers as well,
Right.
independents, but Democrats aren't. So I would think that whatever change, if it were to occur, would be incremental.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think that the Bernie wave here has really contributed to more independents registering? Because I think it has. I think it has.
Yeah, that may be part of it, but I think the independent numbers have been picking up for a few years now, and I'm not real sure what's driving that, but for whatever reason, the Democratic numbers just seem like they're down.
I do think that if there's a silver lining for Democrats, and I'm serious about this, is that it's they had reached a point where it could not get any worse. I mean, they no, but in all seriousness, they lost every statewide race. You know, they're down to 30 out of 101 seats in the House and 9 seats out of 48 seats in the Senate. It just, at a certain point, it just can't get any worse. They can regroup, think about who they are as a party. All these sort of factions that had one foot into the party or were really maybe too conservative and drifting to the Republican side are gone. And so what they can do is work on stoking enthusiasm in their true believers, in real Democrats, and build the party. And I do think you've seen that just in the kind of volume and enthusiasm in recent years. I mean, if you think about when Jerry Askins ran against Governor Fallon, it was almost as a independent or, as you said, Republican light. You know, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a conservative Democrat. I'm a different kind of Democrat. I'm not like Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. Joe Dorman ran with, I think, a lot more fire in his belly and didn't run away from, to a certain extent, Obamacare. You know, he said he wanted to take federal dollars, and although he also,
which I still think we should have.
Sure, but I think you're going to keep seeing candidates that are more unabashedly progressive, and I don't know that they'll win, but I would think that more Democrats would at least be excited to vote for real Democrats as opposed to trying to hide or pretend they're Republicans.
And
Speaking
whisper
of
that
Democrats,
they were Democrats.
let's go to one right now in the 5th Congressional Democrats, 5th Congressional District. The Oklahoma's Juliana Keeping's at the watch party for Tom Gill. And so let's kick it over to Juliana and see what we can learn from that watch party.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Juliana. What's the scene there?
Okay, do you want me here or
All
there,
right.
or where would you like me to go somewhere else?
Oh, no, we're here. I am here with retired college professor Tom Gill of Edmond at a watch party at District House in Oklahoma City. And he is running in this primary against Al McCaffrey, former state senator, because Mr. Gill thinks he is the foe who can best first-term U.S. Representative Steve Russell of Choctaw. Is that right, sir?
Yes, unquestionably.
And someone just walked over with a notebook and delivered some news. And what is that news?
It shows that our lead has increased since last time she talked to me. It's a little over 300 votes now.
Oh, great. And was that last time we talked, it was 60% of the precinct and you were ahead by a few hundred votes? And what is it now?
196, and I think it was 311 now.
Great. Do you guys in the studio have any questions for Mr. Guild, or we can talk about his issues and campaign?
Kathy, do you have something for candidate Gill?
Hi, Tom. How are you? It's Cathy Cummings.
Cathy Cummings says hello from the studio.
Hi, Cathy.
You're doing great.
He says,
sweetie.
hi, I'm having to feed your questions through.
Oh. Tell him I think he's doing great and keep it up.
Kathy says you're doing great and keep it up.
Hey, Juliana.
Yeah, but tell me, why are you the one? Oh, yeah.
Ask him what
Yes,
his
Rick.
chances might be in the fall if he if he were to be the nominee?
Sure. So question from the studio, what do you think your chances are in the fall if you were to be the nominee? Representative Russell won by a landslide in 2014.
He did, and I
So-
wasn't his opponent. And, you know, one of the biggest differences is electability. If you look at the history of the state of Oklahoma, there's only one candidate in the history of Oklahoma that has run for the 5th Congressional District seat as a Democrat that received more votes than I did. And that was Cori Williams in 1992. So I've received the most votes in the last 24 years and the second most votes in the history of the state of Oklahoma. That means I have a coalition already put together. In 2012, as the nominee for the Democratic Party for the seat, I received 97,504 votes. That would have been enough to win the seat in 2014. Unfortunately, Mr. McCaffrey received 40,000 less than I did 2 years later. So I received 97,504 votes.
All right, but I gotta stop you. Let's talk about the last time a Democrat actually held this 5th district seat, which was what, 1974?
Well, but
Are the winds of change a-blowing?
I'll get to that, but I don't want you to stop me because I think this is important. I put together a coalition of 97,504 votes as the nominee for the Democratic Party in 2012. That would have been enough to win the election. That vote total would have won the election in 2014. Unfortunately, our nominee, Mr. McCaffrey, that year got 40,000 votes less than I did and got trounced, as you mentioned. So if we're going to have someone to win the seat for the first time since John Jarman was reelected in 1974 as a Democrat, then in 1975 he switched parties to the Republican Party. And then he didn't run for re-election in 76, and Mickey Edwards was elected, and we've had a Republican in the seat ever since. So you need someone that has the kind of coalition that I put together in 2012. 97,504 votes is enough to have won the seat a number of times in recent years.
All right, so you heard him, guys. He thinks he has the votes to beat the GOP if he's the nominee in the fall. So I guess we'll see. Anyone have any more questions from the studio they want me to throw his way?
Juliana, we appreciate your time, and please relay our thanks to the candidate, Tom Guild. All right, very good. The Oklahoma's Juliana Keeping reporting from the 5th Congressional District, the Democratic Watch Party for Tom Guild. We're going to wrap it up at this point. We've been going for the past half hour. We'll be back at the top of the hour at 9 p.m. with more live results from the Oklahoman's video studio as the Oklahoma primary results continue to come in.